Here's a video that someone requested. They wanted to know how they could finish their siding over the brick. And I think the best way to start this one will be to provide you with an example of a building. And let's just pretend like this is a building without a roof. And the exterior is finished with the building paper. Building paper goes from the top of the wall to the bottom of the wall. So if we had a brick wainscoting around it, the building paper would go all the way down to the ground. Any water that got behind the siding or behind the finish above would simply leak behind the brick without some type of metal. And this right here might give you some ideas for finishing the metal with the building exterior, but this individual had a problem with the siding, and I guess it rotted out an area at the bottom of it, and he kind of wanted to finish it. So what you're going to need to do is put some metal, and this can simply be L metal. You can run the metal all the way over the brick cap, or run it and most of the time the brick, I should say, hopefully, is going to be shaped to where it's sloping downward. What this means, any water that would come onto the top of the brick would follow and leave to the front of the building. Not if it was flat, it could simply get behind it, and you can have all sorts of problems. So one of the examples, you can put a piece of metal over the building paper and then install your siding or whatever's going to go over that. But I would prefer to go with a method to where you install some type of a caulking and then press the metal into the caulking to squish it. And again, you're going to need it in the corners. And this caulking here could go all the way up too. Just kind of throwing out an idea there. And another problem you're going to have if you do this is that you're still going to have a problem with this area here. So, water could easily, come out here and then work its way or hang around the bottom here and eventually rot this out. So you might need to remove the trim pieces and install the metal so the metal goes underneath the trim. And then, of course, all of this would be sealed, and then this would be sealed also. So you would, to do that, you would just cut a piece of L metal, cut it kind of like this here, and you could always cut this down the back right where the corner is here, and then take this one and bend it over. But I don't think that would be necessary. Simply do that with the top piece, run it past here, and then bend this one over here, and then just put a bunch of caulking behind it. Put a bunch of caulking in this area here and in this area here. And of course, right here, just glob it in there and then put your metal over it and then put your trim back. And you can always put another piece of building paper over the metal. And this, of course, would allow any water that gets behind the siding to go onto the metal and then out, instead of having it go onto the metal and then any leaks behind, if this paper wasn't here, any leaks that would go onto this building paper could go behind the metal. Now don't forget, when I said you could caulk this, make sure that you caulk the top of it also, and make sure it's sealed really good. Make sure there's not any little holes in there, and if you aren't going to use the paper. So if you are going to use the building paper right here, you don't need to caulk this, because any water that gets behind this can simply go out and follow the original path behind the brick. So you would simply use the metal and then put the paper over it. Any water that gets behind the siding now would simply work its way through the building safely. Hope that makes sense. So we would have the paper, and then again, this would be unprotected. The paper would wrap all the way around the corners. Also, you're not going to, if you remove the trim, the paper will need to go all the way around the corners. Hope that makes sense. Now, the individual also wanted to know how to finish the bottom. He had siding. This was his original picture that he showed me, I believe. Had a piece of wood trim on the bottom. And if you're going to do that, you're probably going to need to install some type of metal again. You'll have more metal, just metal, metal, metal. So I'd recommend just doing this unless you had to match the original siding. And if that was the case, you could always just cut a piece of metal behind it, and this right here might be fine. Make it to where you could pull this piece of wood out if you needed to replace it again. Give you an idea here, you'd have the lap siding on top of a piece of wood trim, the lap siding on top of the metal, and then the wood trim. This would allow the water to drain off again. And then, of course, the lap siding sitting right on top of the metal, or I shouldn't say that, depending upon the siding. You're probably going to need to have at least 1/4 of an inch gap here. 1/8 of an inch would be the minimum to allow water to actually get out if it does get behind it. I can't tell you how many times I come to a job where someone has lap siding and they caulk everything. They caulk the bottom of it. Well, what does that do? That doesn't give you an avenue for the water to drain out of. So anyway, I hope it makes sense. Hope this makes sense. If not, feel free to leave any questions in the comment area and I will answer them as soon as possible.